what you can't explain. It's coming back again. I can see it now, I can see it now. What you can't explain, coming back again.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. Today we're talking about a developing case that has filled me with so much rage and frustration. I've just been spending a lot of time screaming into a pillow. We talk about these types of cases so much because they happen far too often, and we need to keep talking about them to shine a light on the institutional failure that constantly unfolds around us, abandoning those who need protection the most. Children. In this case, 3 little girls left their mother's home in Wenatchee, Washington with their father for a normal visit, as they had many times before, but this time they never returned. Peyton Decker was 9 years old, Evelyn Decker was 8 years old, and Olivia Decker was just 5 years old. What began as a late-night missing persons report quickly spiraled into a desperate search across the rugged Washington wilderness and eventually a gruesome discovery. An abandoned truck, bloody handprints, a tent, zip ties, and a father with elite military training who seemed to have vanished into thin air. Now authorities are racing against time as the father, 32-year-old Travis Decker, remains on the run, armed with survival skills, a history of instability, and nothing left to lose. We know that Travis Decker is probably out there somewhere, and the deeper investigators dig, the more disturbing this case becomes. Today we are diving into the devastating case of the Decker family. It is a story of heartbreak, institutional failure, and 3 little girls who should still be here. We have a lot to talk about today, but before we dive in, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN. I want you to imagine this. You're deep into researching a case, let's say an unsolved disappearance, and you've gone full digital detective mode. But the second you start digging into foreign databases, court archives, or geo-blocked interviews, boom, your access is restricted, or worse, your digital footprint is exposed, like evidence at a crime scene. That is where Surfshark VPN comes in. And like I said, today's video is sponsored by Surfshark, and they're basically the digital equivalent of witness protection for your online activity. And if you ask me what I love the most about it is the unlimited devices, because with one subscription, you can install Surfshark on unlimited devices. And I mean truly unlimited. Your phone, your laptop, your TV, your Roku, your kid's PlayStation, your kid's gaming PC, your mother's iPhone, your father's tablet. I mean, even your smart toaster, if it's online, no judgment if it is. We want to keep ourselves safe online, but we also want to protect the people that we care about. So it's nice that Surfshark gives you that capability to have unlimited devices. And with Surfshark, you can rest easy knowing that every single internet-connected device that you own or that your loved ones own will be safer to use. And Surfshark's no logs policy means they aren't keeping receipts on your browsing history. Not now, not ever. They're also the only VPN that covers 100 countries. And this is huge when you want to access region-locked content, like that one documentary you've been dying to see, but it's not available in the US. And with Surfshark VPN, you can unlock 15 of the largest Netflix country libraries, including the US and Japan, by simply connecting to a server in the right country. You can do this with Hulu and Amazon. You can access all sorts of content that is not available in the United States. For example, and I talk about this all the time, I love British TV, but we have to wait for certain new seasons of television shows that air in the UK to come over here to the US. We usually have to wait months, sometimes longer. So I love that I can just use Surfshark VPN, make it seem like I'm connecting from the UK, and then watch those shows in real time. And the great thing is you can unlock content on most platforms by installing Surfshark on computers, phones, smart TVs, Roku, Apple TV, and so much more. Also, I've been going out of town a lot more often due to filming on site for Strange and Unusual, and I love to use Surfshark to avoid getting price gouged when booking travel. With Surfshark, you can overcome location-based price discrimination on things like plane tickets and car rentals by connecting to VPN servers in different countries. And Surfshark also helps you to not get locked out of your bank account when you're traveling abroad. You're just going to connect to a VPN server in your home country to avoid that bank account freeze, which, let's be honest, when it happens is beyond inconvenient, and it's the last thing you need when you're already stressed out and overstimulated from trying to make your connecting flights. So do yourself and your data a favor. Go to surfshark.com/stephanieharlowe and use code stephanieharlowe at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN for free. Once again, that is surfshark.com/stephanieharlowe, and the code is, you guessed it, pretty easy, Stephanie Harlowe. Whether you're investigating mysteries or just trying to stream your favorite television show in peace, Surfshark has your back. Check them out. Thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. Wenatchee is a small city nestled in the heart of Washington State, right where the Columbia and Wenatchee rivers meet. It is known as the apple capital of the world thanks to its massive apple orchards and long-standing agricultural roots, but there's more to Wenatchee than just fruit. Surrounded by the Cascade Mountains and stunning natural beauty, Wenatchee draws in outdoor enthusiasts year-round for hiking, skiing, and camping. The community here is tight-knit, the kind of place where neighbors know each other and family roots run deep, but like many rural or semi-rural towns, Wenatchee also carries a sense of isolation, both geographically and emotionally, especially when tragedy strikes. Cell service can be spotty in the surrounding wilderness, and the terrain makes search efforts incredibly difficult when people go missing. Wenatchee may look like a peaceful, postcard-perfect town, and most of the time it is, but even here, in a place surrounded by gorgeous mountains and apple orchards, dark things can happen, and when they do, the impact hits very hard. On Friday, May 30th, 2025, Travis Decker arrived to the home of his ex-wife, Whitney, to pick up their 3 daughters for his usual custodial visitation with them. Just before 10 p.m., the Wenatchee Police Department received a call from Whitney because she was worried about her children. They were supposed to have been back home by 8 p.m., and she'd called Travis Decker's cell phone multiple times, but each call had gone to voicemail. At that time, an Amber Alert was not issued for the 3 little girls. And you know we're going to come back to that because the Wenatchee police had requested that an Amber Alert be issued, but they were turned down by the Washington State Patrol, who said there was not enough evidence to warrant the alert, right? They said Travis Decker had no history of domestic violence, no history of abusing his 3 daughters, and the State Patrol said they had no reason to believe that Olivia, Evelyn, and Peyton were in any imminent danger. It was noted that the girl's mother, Whitney, had told the police that she and Travis had been married for 7 years, but they'd gotten divorced a few years prior. And Whitney described the divorce as civil. She denied any history of domestic violence, but she also did stress that this was out of character for Travis because he always brought their daughters back on time after visits. The following morning, which was Saturday, May 31st, Travis and his 3 daughters did not show up to a planned 5K running event that they were supposed to be attending, and an endangered missing persons alert was issued, which is still less urgent than an Amber Alert. And more importantly, the public notification, such as the way the public's notified, is vastly different. An Amber Alert blasts out via the Emergency Alert System, the EAS, which will interrupt radio and television broadcasts. It pushes alerts to cell phones via wireless emergency alerts, displays the alert on highway signs, and is spread through media, law enforcement, and digital platforms rapidly and widely. An endangered missing person advisory may also be shared through law enforcement channels, media, social media, and online posting, but it does not use the emergency alert system or broadcast the alert to highway signs. Additionally, there are no push phone notifications, which means a much more limited reach of the message, right? We've all been in a situation where an Amber Alert's come through our phone. Impossible to ignore that loud blaring sound. You pick up your phone, you see what it is. But with an endangered missing persons alert, you might get a text, maybe not, maybe they'll talk about it on the news, who knows. But it's not as urgent of a notification as an Amber Alert is. So, to try and locate Travis Decker, law enforcement ran his vehicle and plates through a record search, and they discovered that his truck had been involved in 2 recent crashes that same month. One on May 4th, which seems to be a hit and run, and another on May 27th, which appears to be a head on collision. Now, following the investigation of the second motor vehicle incident, Travis appears to have been ticketed for driving without insurance, and he received some other tickets for various things. The police also found, through registered license plate readers, that Decker had been traveling northbound on the Wenatchee Bridge around 5:41 p.m. on Friday night after he had picked up his daughters from their mother's home. A detective met with Whitney Decker, who gave them some more insight into what was going on with her ex-husband at the time. She reported that Travis Decker had initially been granted overnight visits with his daughters by the court. But since then, he'd become homeless, and the parenting plan was modified to prevent overnight visits until Travis had more stable housing. The detective's probable cause affidavit stated, quote, "The girl's mother denied any domestic violence during their marriage, but did mention moments of power or control he used. She provided the examples of randomly leaving or waking her up by screaming in the middle of the night. She also said near the end of the marriage, he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder that she believes he currently does not take medications for," end quote. The situation became even more dire when Travis Decker did not show up to work on the morning of Monday, June 2nd. And when detectives went to his place of employment and spoke to his boss, they were told by the boss that he had noted some recent mental health issues with Travis. So on Monday, June 2nd, police filed for a warrant to arrest Travis Decker on charges of custodial interference. Then, around 3:45 p.m., a Chelan County deputy found Decker's white 2017 GMC Sierra truck abandoned near Rock Island Campground off Icicle Road, about 17 miles west of Leavenworth. Within no time, multiple law enforcement agents were on the scene, and they soon discovered the bodies of 5-year-old Olivia Decker, 8-year-old Evelyn Decker, and 9-year-old Peyton Decker. The bodies were located about 75 to 100 yards past Travis Decker's truck, down a small embankment, and law enforcement confirmed that all 3 girls were found with plastic bags over their heads and zip ties around their wrists. The medical examiner gave a preliminary sort of cause of death for these 3 girls, and the medical examiner said that they all died from asphyxiation. That's what it appears happened, which this is very devastating to even talk about, right? And you think about these 3 little girls, and you think about them being with their father, a trusted person, someone they loved, someone they depended on to keep them safe, and you think about what were they feeling in these moments, and what were they thinking, and how terrified were they, and how confused were they. And obviously, more details will come out, but we don't know how this happened. We don't know if Travis put the bags over their heads one at a time, if he separated them, because we don't know in what position their bodies were found or how far away from each other, if he separated them so that they wouldn't have to sit next to each other and be terrified, if he did all 3 at once, if he stood there and watched, if he left. We don't know. But none of these scenarios is better than the other, right? It's all horrifying. It's horrifying. And not a great way to go, right? To be suffocated and smothered by a plastic bag while your wrists are, fastened together and you can't move and you can't take the bag off your head. It's just absolutely horrendous to think about. Now, detectives also found zip ties and plastic bags strewn throughout the area around Decker's truck, along with 2 bloody handprints on the tailgate of the vehicle. and put a pin in that. We're going to come back to it. Police noticed that the area showed signs of recent activity. There was a tent, fire pit, and cooler located a short distance away. I don't think that it was right there by the truck. Like if you were at the truck, you could see this little camping area because they've described it as being within walking distance. So it seems that the camping area was, out of eyesight of the truck, but within walking distance. And although his truck was there, Travis Decker was nowhere to be found. Inside the truck, police found personal items such as food, blankets, and car seats, along with a wallet in the center console, and investigators would track Decker's cell phone to discover that he had visited that same campground, that same location, on Thursday, May 29th. The day before, he had picked up his daughters and then just never brought them home. On Tuesday, a judge issued a warrant for Decker's arrest for 3 counts of kidnapping and 3 counts of murder, and an extensive manhunt began for Travis Decker, who officials believe has enough survival training to remain off the grid for an extended period of time. Why do they believe that? Who is Travis? Let's talk about it. Travis Decker attended Pewaukee High School in Wisconsin, where he was remembered as being a gifted athlete. He competed in state wrestling and played both JV and varsity football. Travis graduated in 2013. This was the same year he enlisted in the Army as an 11 Bravo infantryman, which is the primary combat role in the U.S. Army, and it is notably one of the most demanding and dangerous jobs in the United States military. The following year, Travis was deployed to Afghanistan, and according to his father, this is when Travis's mental health issues started. By 2014, the United States was reducing its military footprint in Afghanistan after over a decade of combat. However, it still did have tens of thousands of troops on the ground in Afghanistan as part of the military's continued operations during the final phase of the war in Afghanistan. And this operation was known as Operation Enduring Freedom, which did not technically or formally end until December of 2014. Now, although the mission, the reason for being there, was shifting, infantry units like 11 Bravo were still actively deployed in very volatile regions, performing tasks such as route security, patrolling in high-risk areas, base defense, and in some cases, advising Afghan soldiers. Now, following the withdrawal of U.S. and NATO combat troops in 2014, the Afghan National Security Forces became the primary force in the fight against the Taliban, while the United States invested heavily in training and equipping them. But in 2014, there was a spike in attacks where Afghan soldiers were turning on U.S. troops, along with major Taliban offenses. The Taliban was still going strong. So Afghanistan was still a dangerous combat environment, especially for frontline roles like Travis Decker's. According to Travis's family, he came home suffering from complex PTSD. And this does make sense because if Travis served as an infantryman in Afghanistan in 2014, he likely experienced prolonged exposure to stress and danger, potential trauma from combat or loss, and also a sense of mission uncertainty as the war effort shifted and changed. Now, based on the timeline, it seems that Travis married Whitney after his return from Afghanistan, but I'm not sure if he knew her before. I do know that their oldest daughter, Peyton, was 9 and would have been born in or around 2016, so that does line up with a marriage happening around the same time Travis returned to the States. In 2018, Travis attended the non-commissioned academy at Fort Benning in Georgia, and according to their website, the NCO Academy is the premier institution in the Army, comprised of, quote, fit, adaptive, agile, and standards-based leaders committed to producing the best signal, cipher, and public affairs non-commissioned officers capable of integrating, leading, and supporting commanders to gain decision dominance in multi-domain operations, end quote. So for those of us who are not literate in military terms, a non-commissioned officer, or an NCO, is an enlisted member of the military who has been promoted to a leadership role, typically starting at the rank of corporal or sergeant. Unlike commissioned officers, like lieutenants and captains, NCOs do not receive their authority through a presidential commission. They earn it through experience, performance, and promotion from within the enlisted ranks. So if Travis attended the NCO Academy, he was being groomed for leadership within the military, and he likely received advanced training in tactics, field operations, and soldier management. We also know that Travis reached the rank of Sergeant E5, which means he was a recognized leader in the Army. He had experience managing people under stress, and he likely possesses a strong understanding of strategy, decision making, and survival in adverse conditions. We also know that Travis Decker earned a few badges during his time in the Army, including the Expert Infantry Badge. And in order to earn this badge, Travis would have needed to complete a physical assessment test. And this test would include tasks such as land navigation, expert weapon qualification, a march of 12 miles while carrying a 25-pound load, first aid, camouflage, map reading, and communications. Travis also had a parachutist badge, which he would have earned by completing the 3-week airborne school at Fort Benning. So the first week, Travis would have learned the proper landing techniques, how to exit an aircraft, and also he would learn jump commands. The second week, he would have practiced jumps from 34-foot and 250-foot towers, and the third and final week, Travis would have needed to complete 5 actual jumps from a U.S. Air Force aircraft. And these jumps, they would happen in various conditions during the day, during the night, with combat gear, without combat gear. They're training them for all sorts of situations. So to put it plainly, Travis Decker had spent years and years training to win the Hunger Games, basically. He would be able to survive in the wilderness for a longer period of time without, having to restock, get supplies. He would know how to be strategic, how to avoid detection. He would know basically how to be a ghost after what he did to his daughters. And at this point, while I'm filming this, which is June 6th, Friday, June 6th, Travis Decker has still not been apprehended. In 2021, Travis Decker transferred to the Walla Walla National Guard in southeastern Washington state, and he was a full-time member there until around 2023 or 2024, when he suddenly went part-time. And this seems to coincide with the period in time when Travis and Whitney Decker were going through their divorce and issues with the custody of their 3 daughters. Now, according to court documents, Whitney Decker filed a petition for divorce in Chelan County on November 14th, 2022. But at this time, it did not seem that she had concerns about Travis's mental health or the safety of their children when they were with their father. I have my theories about this. I have my theories about why she didn't have concerns. I'm going to talk about it in a little bit. So a parenting plan was filed that both Whitney and Travis agreed to, and neither parent stated that they had an issue with neglect, emotional or physical problems, substance abuse, abusive use of conflict, or withholding the children. So no parental alienation was happening. It seemed to be a pretty black and white, cut and dry divorce, and both parents were kind of cooperating equally. Now, Whitney Decker said she had no concerns of neglect, child abuse, or domestic violence on Travis's part, and she also said that no protection order or restraining order was necessary. And the divorce and ensuing custody arrangements seemed to be amicable, and I guess as peaceful as they could be. Just 2 people who had parted ways and were trying to figure out a way to co-parent together that would not further traumatize their 3 children, who are all young, right? All under the age of 10. So the divorce in general is probably going to cause some issues. And it seemed that Whitney and Travis had agreed, let's not make this any harder on ourselves or our children who we love so much. So on January 21st, 2023, both Travis and Whitney completed the Supporting Children Through Divorce program at the Washington State University extension of Chelan and Douglas counties. And a few months later, on March 7th, 2023, a document called Findings and Conclusions About a Marriage was filed, which again, this noted that neither party had any issues. They didn't feel protective orders or restraining orders were needed. There was no complications between these 2 adults. And this document is a standard court form used in divorce proceedings, particularly in Washington state, and it formally records the judge's decisions about major issues in a divorce case, including finalizing a parenting plan. Now, at this time, a parenting plan was finalized. Once again, no concerns from either party were noted, and Travis Decker was granted visitation with his 3 daughters every other weekend from Friday night at 6 p.m. to Sunday night at 6 p.m. But then, on September 20th, 2024, Whitney Decker and her attorney filed a request to modify the parenting plan for several reasons. The main reason being Travis's lack of a secure and safe home. Apparently, in October of 2022, a month after the divorce was filed, Travis had moved into the Armory in Wenatchee. And the Armory is just what it sounds like. It's a place to store weapons, and it's operated by the Washington Army National Guard. It's basically a military facility used by the National Guard units that has classrooms, offices, vehicle bays, storage for gear and weapons, also a sleeping barracks. And although the Armory is not intended for long-term housing, some guardsmen or transient individuals sometimes sleep there temporarily under informal arrangements. And what probably happened is Travis, who was in the National Guard, went to his superiors and was like, hey, I'm going through a divorce. I have to leave the house. I don't have a place to stay at. Can I crash here at the Armory for a little bit? And they said yes. And initially, Travis did only stay at the Armory for a few months before he moved into an apartment in Wenatchee. But when his lease at his apartment was up, Travis didn't renew it. Instead, he moved back into the Armory, and then he purchased an RV, which he took with him to Idaho in May of 2024 before the RV was repossessed, and then Travis returned to Washington State in June of 2024. Now, Whitney found out that her 3 daughters had been staying with Travis at the Armory during his weekends, and they were sleeping on mattresses. And Whitney stated, quote, "There were times that I told him I didn't feel comfortable with the girls staying in the Armory with a bunch of strange men. He told me he was staying in the RV, but then I found out that he really was staying at the Armory again." End quote. Whitney also brought up an incident that had happened on December 19th, 2023, when her youngest daughter, Olivia, had FaceTimed her screaming. And Whitney said, quote, "Travis was nowhere in sight. Peyton had to go find him, and he was with the dogs. He told me that Peyton was unattended in the Armory with Olivia, playing on the lat pull-down machine, and smashed Olivia's fingers. Wasn't comforting her. Olivia and Peyton were crying uncontrollably. Come to find out, they'd been sleeping in the Armory." End quote. So a lat pull-down machine is a piece of workout equipment, so there's weights, and she probably pinched her fingers under the weights because some weights lift and more stay depending on how much weight you want. So that's what probably happened. But what Whitney is saying here is, which I completely understand, she doesn't want her very young daughters sleeping in the Armory because you've got all sorts of people staying there, right? People who are between homes, soldiers who, maybe have some mental health issues, drug or alcohol issues, we don't know, transient individuals, things like that. So what Whitney is basically expressing concern for is, maybe Travis falls asleep and then one of these guys who, I'm not saying they're all bad, but there could be somebody in there who's bad and who has nefarious intentions. And maybe one of these guys sneaks over to the girls while their father is sleeping and unable to protect them, and, bad things happen. So Whitney is concerned with that. I completely agree with her. I would have been as well. I would not want my very young daughters sleeping in this Armory with their father who, has to also sleep at some point, and a bunch of strange men that nobody knows, and we don't know where they came from. We don't know what their history is. It's just not a good situation. Whitney and her attorney also noted that Whitney believed Travis had been neglecting his parental duties and that he'd had long-term emotional or physical problems that were getting in the way of his ability to parent. And in my opinion, you can tell that Whitney Decker is constantly attempting to give Travis the benefit of the doubt. She was quick to recognize when he did things right, so she wasn't just attacking him and criticizing everything he did. She stated, quote, "Travis is able to attend events for our daughters. He is engaged and demonstrates a genuine love for them, which are meaningful and appreciated by our children. Travis also has some emotional/mental health issues that were the primary catalyst to the end of our marriage. His borderline personality disorder and narcissism became rampant. Since our separation, it has become increasingly clear that Travis has been struggling to maintain stability in his life." End quote. Whitney claimed that Travis's lack of stability and his emotional issues had created a negative impact on their daughters, and the children themselves were experiencing heightened emotional stress, which Whitney said could be demonstrated through, quote, "screaming, crying bouts at drop-off or when they get off a phone call. They are all happy, smart, well-adjusted girls, with the exception of when Travis brings them back to me after his visitations." End quote. Whitney detailed some incidents that had caused her concern for Travis's emotional state, saying that he would have some outbursts where he he would burst into her home against her objections and yell for the girls. In August of 2023, Travis had told Whitney that he didn't want to take his daughters during their regularly scheduled weekend because he claimed the girls were walking on eggshells due to how he reprimanded the dogs, which to me sounds like he's getting very angry and violent with the dogs, which is scaring these three little girls, and they're walking on eggshells because they're terrified. Whitney also talked about an incident that happened on July 25th, 2024, where Travis had, quote, hitchhiked to my house and asked to stay in the basement with the girls. 3 hours late, said he could pick the girls up from the play, but he was hitchhiking, so the stranger would have had to have picked them up, end quote. So once again, Travis is showing up at her house. He's late to pick up the girls. Sometimes he doesn't even take them. Now he's showing up, in the car of a stranger, and he's late, and he's like, hey, can I stay here with them in the basement? And also, I can pick them up from their play, but I'm going to have to go with this weird stranger who gave me a ride here, and that person is going to pick up our children. It's just absolutely ludicrous. He's not thinking straight. He's not thinking in the best interests of his young daughters. Whitney claimed that as time went on, Travis was getting more and more unstable, and she stated, quote, he has made huge sacrifices to serve our country and loves his girls very much, but he has got to get better for our girls. I do not want to keep Travis from the girls at all. To the contrary, I have bent over backwards to facilitate that relationship, but I cannot have the girls staying in what is essentially a homeless shelter, at times unsupervised, with dozens of strange men, or staying in a tent or living in his truck with him, both in extreme temperatures and unknown areas for their safety, end quote. So Whitney's saying even if Travis is, going camping and they're staying in a tent, she doesn't feel comfortable with that either because they're out in an isolated area. There's wild animals. There could be nefarious people. The girls could wander off and get lost. They don't have a lot of protection. There's no cell phone service. And if they're staying in his car, a similar sort of thing, like where are you parking your truck when you guys are sleeping at night? Somebody could smash the truck and try to get in to take the girls or to hurt you. Like, it's not safe to have children kind of in these unsettled circumstances. They need to be in a house or an apartment behind locked doors, in the comfort of their own bed, in the safety of surroundings that, comfort them, not unfamiliar places. So on September 20th, 2024, when Whitney requested a change in the parenting plan, she also requested that Travis be evaluated for anger management and domestic violence, and that he have a full psychiatric evaluation performed by a licensed psychiatrist to see if there were any other potential diagnoses. And it does seem, like I said, that Travis Decker had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder towards the end of his marriage, and it makes sense that Whitney maybe wanted to find out if there were other possible disorders that her ex-husband was suffering from. She did mention Travis's narcissism getting out of hand. So, potentially she wanted to see if he could get an official diagnosis for that personality disorder along with the BPD. And as we know from Travis's family, after Afghanistan, he returned with CPTSD. So we get a lot of stuff happening. And listen, truly, I understand and I am sympathetic. To live with CPTSD and BPD would be absolutely horrific for the person who has those diagnoses. It would be completely just a living hell, constantly. It would be very difficult. Just either one of those things is difficult to live with, but both combined, yeah, he had to have been, very miserable and confused and frustrated at times, maybe not really knowing what was going on in his own head at times, depressed, sad, then the divorce, and then, he can't see his daughters all the time. I'm sure he was going through a very rough time, but still, it does not excuse what he did. Because remember, Whitney said he'd been diagnosed with BPD, but he was not taking medication for it. So Whitney requested that both she and Travis appear at a hearing within 30 days to go over her requests. And surprisingly, for a family court, things did move pretty quickly, and they both appeared in court to discuss her petition on September 27th, so within 7 days. Now, Whitney's attorney explained to the judge that Travis would have his daughters sleeping in his truck or the armory, where there were dozens of strange men around, and Whitney was requesting that the court eliminate overnight visits between Travis and his children until he had secured safe and stable housing. This is not irrational. This is not a crazy request, completely reasonable. Travis responded to this, telling the court that there was no reason to change the parenting plan because he felt he already didn't get enough time with his daughters and he was no longer full-time with the National Guard, so he would have more time to spend with them, which is kind of ironic, right? And it also does show that this person maybe isn't thinking reasonably because you show up late to pick them up, you don't have a ride when you do pick them up, you don't want to take them when it's your weekend because the girls are nervous around you because of the way you treat the dogs. It doesn't seem like somebody who's going out of his way to spend as much time with his children as possible. It seems like somebody who's going through a tough time who should acknowledge that, get some help so he can be the best that he can be for his children. But that's not what he did. And according to a spokesperson with Travis's branch of the National Guard, Travis was part-time, but by the spring of 2025, he had not attended drills for roughly a year. And this spokesperson said that paperwork for administrative separation had been started, but was not completed yet. Because when you're in the National Guard, you have to do certain drills. I think it's like 1 week a month and 2 weekends, or one month a year, 2 weekends a month, something like that. I can't remember, but you have to do some weekends. You have to do a full week sometimes. Travis was not doing any of that at all. So it does appear that very shortly after going part-time, Travis just stopped showing up altogether. And this does coincide with what appears to be a degradation of his mental state. And I say that because Travis seemed to take his military service very seriously. He had worked hard to get to the place and the rank that he was at. He was dedicated to it. He was being trained for leadership. Obviously, his superiors and fellow soldiers saw potential in him and noticed his work ethic. This was important to him. And a neighbor of Travis's told the media that he'd known 3 generations of the Decker family, including Travis's grandfather and father. And this neighbor said that the Deckers were a very tight-knit family with strong military roots, and Travis's own father, Troy, was special forces in the military. So Travis had followed in his father's footsteps when he made the decision to enlist in the Army right out of high school. And this is not somebody who would sort of, put that in jeopardy if they were in their right mental state. Back to the court date on September 27th, Whitney's lawyer requested that Whitney be given the ability to limit Travis's visitation with the girls and that Travis not be allowed to be alone with them unsupervised at any time. Whitney wanted Travis to enroll in individual counseling sessions at least twice a month, along with the other evaluations she'd already requested. And like I said, she wanted the ability to limit further visitation if he did not comply with these requests. Now, Travis responded to this saying he understood his ex-wife's concerns about his living situation, but he objected to not being able to have overnights or not being able to be alone with his daughters because he said he liked to take the girls camping on the weekends. He also said that he had no objection to paying child support. He just didn't have the ability to pay anything at that time. And he said he felt it was important for his kids to understand how the world works. And he believed that the girls could learn from his current situation. So I guess Travis is saying, they can kind of see like these are the circumstances you get into if you don't make the right decisions, or I guess maybe some people have to live like this, and so it's good for you to see that. I don't necessarily agree because you're not just some people, you're their father, and they should, have a vision of you in their heads until they get a little older and they realize you're only human. But you're their father, and you need to provide them with a safe space and security far more than you need to provide them with life lessons right now. They are 5, 8, and 9. And the judge ended up, kind of agreeing with Whitney. The judge believed there was cause to modify the parenting plan based on, Travis's recent life changes. So the parenting plan was modified and the overnight visits were taken away, and Travis was granted visitation every other weekend on Fridays from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., on Saturdays from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., and on Sundays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The court also found limiting factors of neglect and emotional/physical problems with Travis, and he was ordered to get an anger management and domestic violence evaluation along with a complete psychiatric evaluation with a licensed psychiatrist. However, Travis Decker never signed the parental plan modification form, and he did not seek any mental health counseling. And all of these events led to what happened to Olivia, Evelyn, and Peyton when they trustingly walked away from the safety of their mother and their home with their father on May 30th, 2025. Now, we have so much to talk about, but first I want to address a newer piece of news that's come out during this investigation because it's unfolding every day. We know that Whitney has repeatedly said there was no domestic violence in the marriage. She said this in court paperwork. She said this directly to law enforcement even after her girls went missing. This is what she told the police. Whitney also told the police that when Travis came to pick the girls up from her house that night, he was especially quiet, which was out of character for him. A neighbor of Whitney's has now come out and spoken to the Daily Mail, claiming that he had talked to Decker when the girls were picked up on May 30th. Ben Wynn said that Decker had a sad look on his face as he was picking his children up. And he said, quote, "What was strange is that he kept asking me the same questions at different points in our conversation, like he wasn't remembering he already asked," end quote. Wynn said that, they'd be talking and Travis would be like, "Oh, and how are you?" And Wynn would be like, "Oh, I'm good." And then they would talk about something else. And then a few minutes later, Travis would be like, "And how are you doing? What have you been up to?" And he would kind of keep asking him that as if he forgot that he'd already asked that. I personally think that it was more Travis was distracted because he knew what he was going to do, that his mind wasn't there. And so he kind of wasn't really focused on this conversation. He was focused on what he was planning to do and what he was about to do. But it could also be a sign of a mental break, of a complete, mental burnout, nervous system shutdown, etc. Wynn also claims he knew that Travis Decker had mental health issues and states that Whitney Decker had told him that Travis had beaten her in the past. She said Travis had gone crazy and his outbursts eventually led to their divorce. Wynn said that when he initially, for the first time, met Travis Decker, Travis was a clean-shaven, strong man who had formerly served in the Army and later joined the National Guard. But after moving out of the family home, Travis's appearance began to change. When Wynn would see Travis come over for visits with his children, he noticed that Travis had lost weight. His hair was grown out. He was unshaven and unkempt. And as far as Wynn could tell, the Deckers were a happy family. However, he did recall once seeing Travis Decker with a severely bruised face, and at that same time, during the same time period, Whitney Decker had a broken arm that she was wearing in a sling. And when Wynn asked Travis what had happened to his face, Travis claimed he was suffering from allergies because I guess that causes bruises on your face. But Wynn said that the family moved into the neighborhood several years back, and he kind of got close with them. Sometimes he would mow their lawn, and he remembered how Evelyn had gifted him a friendship bracelet as a thank you for mowing the lawn. And he remembered that all three girls were really sweet. He also recalled how Peyton had introduced herself to his son, who was about the same age, by giving him a handwritten card with a crumpled $1 bill inside. And Peyton wrote inside the card that she couldn't write well just yet, but she was hoping to learn how to be better at writing when she went to school. And the reason I bring this up is because, once again, Whitney has repeated multiple times that there was no instances of violence between herself and Travis. But she said this to court officials and police. And as I mentioned before, it seemed that Whitney really went out of her way to give Travis the benefit of the doubt. She was aware of his mental health issues. She was aware of his past, which she seemed to understand contributed to his current behavior. But I tend to believe that there may have been times that Travis was aggressive with Whitney, but she never actually believed he could or would hurt their children. And she didn't want to say anything to anyone who had the power to affect custody. She didn't want to say anything to those people that might compromise Travis's ability to form and maintain relationships with their three young daughters. Because Whitney was like, yeah, okay, he's kind of gotten aggressive with me, but, there's a reason for why he is this way. He has CPTSD. This is common in men who come back from the military and try to reintegrate in civilian life. We'll get him help. He'll get better. He would never hurt our kids, though. I genuinely believe he would never hurt our kids. And I feel that she was thinking this and feeling this way from personal experience. I also feel this way because I know people who have gone through divorces and they'll say things like this, like, yeah, we didn't work out, but I know he or she loves the children and would never do anything to hurt them, would never bring negativity to their lives. My spouse, although things aren't great with us and maybe we had like a tumultuous relationship, they would never do anything to hurt our children. They would protect our children with their lives. I know that a lot of people feel this way. But I will also say, for anybody who may be having that mindset, if someone is willing to be aggressive with you, especially if it's due to a mental illness that they can't really control, I mean, besides to get help and take medication, but that they can't control if they're not getting help and they're unmedicated, if someone will do that to you, hurt you, be aggressive with you, put their hands on you, they would do it to the kids as well. That's just my opinion. Don't come for me, but that's what I believe. Now, it appears also that Whitney and her neighbor, Bin Win, they had a good relationship. She was texting him with updates after her children went missing. She let him know when the girls' bodies were found. And it seems like they had a good relationship, that they talked often enough to feel comfortable to share these kinds of things amongst themselves. I cannot imagine what motive Wynn would have to lie or to make up this part of the story, especially knowing that Whitney would hear about his statements. So I genuinely 100% do not believe that this neighbor is lying when he claims that Whitney has told him that her husband was, violent with her before and had beaten her. I 100% believe that she told him that. So it is likely that there was some domestic violence in this marriage. Now, on June 4th, a press conference was held by Sheriff Mike Morrison to update the public on the status of Decker and where they thought he could be.
We have learned so far through our investigation today that he is well versed in outdoor survival. And talking with his father, it sounds at times that he would go out and would be leaving off grid for sometimes up to 2.5 months. So we also understand, too, that he at times would do caching. So we understand that that's a possibility, that he could have scoped out this area before, put supplies out there, and has the ability and the knowledge to survive for a long period of time. We saw this before a couple years ago when we assisted Kittitas County with a similar case.
Morrison is saying that Decker is former military with extensive training, and they believe he has the skills and the knowledge to disappear into the wilderness for quite a long time. And this goes hand in hand with law enforcement's belief that Travis visited the campground area where his daughters were found the day before, which means he could have set everything up, including supplies, and he could have had, a go bag, something that he knew he would need to venture out into the thick woods and be off the grid for as long as he needed to be and still survive. He could have food. He could have water. He could have, they have all sorts of survival things, by the way, where you don't even need to bring water. You can bring like a filter thing and just get water from a pond or a lake or a brook, a babbling brook, and filter the water to be drinkable. They have you pee into it and filter your urine to be drinkable, So, and this is a guy who's in the military and served in Afghanistan. I'm sure he's not above it. I'm sure he's not going to be squeamish about this. But personally, I am a bit on the fence about what I believe has happened to Travis Decker. Did he take the lives of his children and then escape, thinking he could hide out and never be found? Or did he do what he did and then take his own life? And I wonder this for many reasons. I wonder this specifically because of the bloody handprints found on Decker's truck and some of the motives that somebody would have to take the lives of their children. It is difficult to wrap our minds around the idea that a parent, someone meant to protect, nurture, and love their child unconditionally, could be capable of taking that child's life. It boggles the mind. We can't understand it. Most of us can't. But the harsh reality is that filicide is tragically more common than most people realize. I've done an entire video on it, and I'll link it in the description box if you haven't seen it yet. This was years ago that I did this video, but it's been a topic that's kind of been close to my heart and has been, I guess, just psychologically riveting to me because I don't and can't understand how somebody could take the life of their own children, but it happens a lot. In the United States, filicide accounts for roughly 2 to 4% of all homicides each year, and children under the age of 1 are at the highest risk, with nearly 1 in 5 child homicide victims being under the age of 5. And while it may seem unthinkable, the numbers tell us that this is not an anomaly. It's a heartbreaking and recurring pattern. Statistically, both mothers and fathers commit this act, but there are striking differences in how and why. So fathers do it far more often than mothers, and fathers are more likely to kill older children, while mothers are more likely to kill infants, particularly in cases of neonaticide when a child is killed within the first 24 hours of their lives. Mental illness also plays a significant role in many of these tragedies, with studies showing that up to 60% of perpetrators especially mothers, suffer from conditions like depression or psychosis at the time of the killing. In cases like this, there's even more statistics we can look to. There was a study published in the Journal of American Academy of Psychiatry and Law, which states that 25 to 30% of all filicide cases involve the parent attempting to or being successful in taking their own lives afterward. In cases committed by fathers, the rate is even higher. Some studies estimate that up to 50% of paternal filicide cases end in that parent taking their own life, the father taking their own life. So let's look at the motives really quickly. Even though we have talked about this before, like I said, I have a whole video about it. And I like to go over these stats every time we talk about a case like this so people remember them. But there are 5 sort of accepted motives for why somebody would do this. First, there's altruistic filicide, where the parent believes that the death is in the child's best interest and they have to protect them from real or perceived suffering. This motive is often associated with mental illness. Second, there is acutely psychotic filicide, where the killing occurs during a psychotic break, or, often without a motive, at least not one that is rational, not one that we will understand. I'm sure the people doing it feel they have their reasons. And in these situations, voices, delusions, or hallucinations may compel the parent to act. Third is unwanted child filicide, where a parent kills a child they never wanted or now see as a burden. Fourth, there is child maltreatment filicide. This is a death resulting from abuse or neglect that is escalated. It often involves a pattern of violence, not just a single event, and this is sadly the most common reason, common motive that you see parents killing their children. Lastly, there is spouse revenge filicide, where the child is killed to punish or hurt the other parent. This is more commonly committed by fathers and is seen during custody battles or in domestic violence contexts. Given what we know about Travis Decker, I have to think we're dealing with either altruistic filicide or spouse revenge filicide. And according to Dr. Philip Resnick, we've talked about him before, he originally developed the 5 primary filicide categories. He acknowledges that it could be a combination of more than one motive. He says that real-life cases are often complex and overlapping. So, for instance, a parent suffering from postpartum psychosis may take the life of their infant out of a delusional belief that they're saving the child from harm, which would be an altruistic motive, while also experiencing acute psychotic symptoms at the same time, which would be the acutely psychotic motive. In domestic violence situations, a father might take the lives of his children to both hurt their mother, which is spouse revenge, and because he sees them as a burden in a life that now feels out of control, which would be the unwanted child motive, or because he thinks that he wants to take his own life and his children would suffer without him being around them and in their lives and on the earth, which would be altruistic. According to the studies, altruistic filicide and spouse revenge filicide are the 2 types most commonly followed by the parent taking their own life. Motives for why someone might take the life of their child or the lives of their children, they're rarely black and white. They're often a tangled web of psychological distress, personal crises, distorted belief systems, and unprocessed rage, hurt, or trauma. Now, do I think that Travis had a psychotic break? Not necessarily, right? Because in the motives for filicide, a psychotic break is usually going to be accompanied by, hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, seeing things possibly. And it just doesn't seem that Travis was in that place. I think he was having a slow deterioration of his mental health, and he was depressed, and he probably felt like, life sucks. And I don't get to see my girls, and I'm never going to be able to get back on my feet because of all my mental health issues. And he was having money issues as well. He was even talking to his ex-wife, Whitney Decker, when he picked the girls up about how he probably would have to get rid of his dog or dogs, which he loved those dogs, but he couldn't afford to take care of them anymore. So he was having financial issues. He was having mental health issues. I truly just think he was depressed, and he felt like, hey, if I take my own life, my daughters will miss me and it will traumatize them and they'll be really sad. So I'll just take all of our lives and then we can be together. And I think that there was probably also a little bit of, trying to get back at Whitney for not standing by him, for not supporting him, for abandoning him. And maybe that wasn't the most logical thought process, right? But he was suffering from borderline personality disorder and CPTSD. And we know that with borderline, you can have these extreme sort of mood swings. Borderline personality disorder is characterized by unstable and intense relationships, distorted self-image, impulsive behavior, difficulty with emotional regulation, self-harm, thoughts of taking your own life, fears of abandonment, paranoia and dissociation. These are all things that are going to, cause Travis Decker to maybe not have the best understanding that his daughters would not be better off dead. And that he too would not be better off dead, but also it's going to cause a little bit of, a rejection feeling, like Whitney didn't stand by me. She abandoned me. I always knew she would. I always thought she would, and now she has. And so I do believe there was a little bit of like that punishment aspect in there. That's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Out of the 5 motives, which one do you think is the most likely that Travis kind of, used, or what category he would fall in this tragic case? So we've already been introduced to Sheriff Mike Morrison, and so I want to go back and talk about the Amber Alert, because remember, the Wenatchee Police Department did request that an Amber Alert be sent out for the Decker girls, but the Washington State Patrol denied that request, claiming they did not have the necessary evidence to believe that the children were in imminent danger. So here's Chris Loftus, the spokesperson for the Washington State Patrol, trying to make this make sense and trying to explain how he believed this case did not meet all of the requirements for an Amber Alert.
There are 5 requirements. The first is obvious: 17 or younger is, because it's for children. The second one is the one. There are 2 of the 5 that this situation didn't meet, and the second one was that there's evidence of abduction. Now, just because a parent with custodial privileges is late bringing a child back does not mean there's been an abduction, and so there was not specific evidence of an abduction. But there was 2 of the others. It was being investigated by a local law enforcement agency and reported to the FBI and all those sorts of things that are required. And the fourth thing is there was ample information that would help us find the people if we had the alert. Sometimes we'll have folks saying, my daughter's missing, my grandfather's missing, whomever's missing. They don't have a photo. They don't really have a very good description. They don't know exactly where he or she was. They don't have a vehicle license or description. There's just nothing. They're missing. But in this case, we had all of that. So we had ample information. But then the last requirement is the one that really is the one that didn't allow it. And that was that there's direct evidence that the person that's missing is in danger of serious bodily injury or death. And we just didn't have that.
Right. Anything else you feel like we want to add? I know a lot of people are asking that question about why didn't this Amber Alert go out. In short, what would you tell them?
In short, it didn't meet the federal requirements for an Amber Alert. And it's important that we maintain those requirements lest our alert systems become noise rather than signal. They're very effective because they're used in a targeted fashion. I believe this year there's been 3 Amber Alerts. There's been 14 IMPA alerts. There's been 22 MIPA alerts, the missing indigenous persons. There's been 42 silver alerts. So, the farther away you get from those specific requirements, the more likely you are to have the alert. But ask yourself, when you see an Amber Alert, do you pay attention more than a silver alert? Well, you do.
Yeah.
Because you know the importance of it. We expanded the IMPA through the day. Monday, we got word that he may be thinking about leaving the state. So we worked with the states that were possible. So continuing to expand. And of course, Friday in that search, they physically found the bodies. And we don't know the timelines. We don't
Right.
know when the girl was killed. We don't know whether the alerts would have made a difference. We just don't know.
Yeah.
But we do all we can do. And sometimes it's not enough. And at Bridge.
Loftus went on to say, quote, "In this case, it was a parent with custodial privileges and the children had not been returned home on time. But that's a rather common occurrence and not something where you would just automatically assume abduction. We're people too, so the loss of a child, the loss of 2 children, the loss of 3 children is devastating. Everybody always looks to how we can improve," end quote. And Chris Loftus says that the alert systems are always evolving and this case could prompt further change, stating, quote, "Obviously it didn't work this time. Obviously we have 3 children who are dead," end quote. Yeah, I have comments on that. I'll give them to you in a second. So when Captain Brian Chance of the WPD was asked about the refusal to send out an Amber Alert and how, he and his police force felt about that, he said, quote, "Were we frustrated? Yes. Probably quite a bit," end quote. Because the Wenatchee Police Department did believe that there was, a valid reason to send out an Amber Alert for the 3 Decker girls. But also, Captain Brian Chance declined to speculate on whether or not an Amber Alert would have made a difference in the search for the 3 girls. And I think he refused to speculate because he didn't want to rock the boat or ruffle any feathers, professional courtesy kind of thing. But someone who has not hesitated to speculate is the mother of these 3 children, Whitney Decker. Whitney's attorney, Ariana Cozart, has given interviews on her client's behalf, giving statements from Whitney stating that they believe this tragedy could have been avoided had the officials intervened in the way they should have.
Law enforcement officials say they did not see Decker as an immediate danger to his own children, so no Amber Alert was sent out. The attorney says the mother thinks that was a deadly mistake.
They did not see him as an immediate physical danger to his children, despite the fact that he had a well-established history of mental health issues. And had they had seen it that way, those children might still be alive. And that's the thing that is so brutal. And the one thing she's really hoping can be changed in this tragedy.
So my question to someone like Chris Loftus would be very simple. Okay, an hour or 2 hours after Travis Decker was supposed to bring his children back home, maybe you're not thinking anything is too crazy. Maybe you think there's a possibility that Travis's car broke down. His cell phone battery was dead. He was trying to get help so he could get himself and his daughters back home. Well, then the next morning, when those girls have been gone all night and there's no communication from Decker to their mother, no sign of any of them, they're not showing up to events. Don't you think that would have called for an Amber Alert? Yeah, I do. But instead you put out an endangered missing persons alert, which is less extreme and which doesn't alert the public in the same way. Why? Why? When they've been gone all night, and it's not like they're just getting brought home late, and you know that their father suffers from mental health issues. You know this, and you know that this father doesn't have the most stable kind of living or life circumstances, and you know it's out of character. It's out of character for him to not bring them home on time. Why would you not have then sent out an Amber Alert? I personally think based on the circumstances, an Amber Alert should have gone out as soon as those girls were reported missing, and maybe someone could have called in with information. Maybe Decker stopped at a gas station with the girls before heading to the camping area, and it was close by to the camping area and it would have narrowed down his location. Maybe someone around the camping area saw Decker and his daughters. We don't know when he took their lives. That's true. So it might not have been enough, and it may have been too late, but it may not have been too late. And if you don't put out an Amber Alert for 3 missing girls who are in the custody of their father, who has documented mental illnesses, who's been having a harder than normal time lately, who's been fighting with their mother in court over custody, then when do you, right? If you're not going to use the widely available statistics on filicide and domestic violence and understand the motives and the context and the red flags, then what is even the point? And I get that they don't want to oversaturate the public with these Amber Alerts, but there are so many cases of missing children where you could say they're just out with their friends, or, maybe they ran away, things like that, where you don't have to send out an Amber Alert. But when you don't know where these 3 girls are for an extended period of time, and you know that all these other mitigating factors are at play, why would you send it out then? If there's even the slightest chance those kids could be in danger, isn't that what Amber Alerts are for? And I don't think anybody is sitting here being like, oh my God, I'm getting way too many Amber Alerts. I hate these nobody likes it. It's shocking. We all get scared. It's like a big shock when the loud blaring sound comes out of your phone. But you'd have to be a pretty cold-hearted monster to be like, ugh, another Amber Alert, another missing child that's potentially in danger. Ugh, God, I hate these. You'd have to be a real asshole for that, okay? So I don't think that the public in general is going to, if they get a few more Amber Alerts a year, they're going to be like, oh, this is too many Amber Alerts. Why do these kids keep going missing, getting themselves in dangerous situations? Nobody's going to do that. So this is a case that I believe an Amber Alert should have been put out for. Let me know if you agree in the comment section. Whitney Decker has also given a statement through her lawyer that she believes her ex-husband was broken inside and that he never would have done this if he was himself. Quote, he clearly had some sort of break, and everything that he had been living with, everything that had been bottled up inside of him for so long as far as trauma, just won out. End quote.
The attorney says Travis worked a couple of minimum wage jobs and at one point was talking to the carpenters union about possible work, but his skills just didn't transfer.
There were no red flags. He was struggling with isolation. And
records show Decker was diagnosed with a serious mental illness. The attorney says that was most likely related to his combat and that Decker tried and tried to get help, but there was too much red tape to get veteran services.
She really feels that the system let her children down. It was the inadequacies in the services for our veterans that killed those children.
And it wasn't just the veterans services who let this family down, but the family court system as well, which we all know is deeply flawed. Whitney Decker knew her husband, right? She knew him better than anybody. She knew when he was doing well and trying to stay healthy, and she knew when his mental health was on a decline. Even us, just looking at the pictures of Travis Decker from a few years ago to now, we can confirm that he looks like a completely different person. His external appearance is starting to match his internal chaos. He's not taking care of himself anymore. He's letting his hair grow. He's not shaving. His physical appearance is slipping. He just doesn't care about himself anymore. We can see from the outside that something's happening on the inside. And yes, the family court did adjust the parenting plan and prevent Travis from having his girls overnight. But they did this because he didn't have secure housing. They did it to protect the girls from potential external threats, like other threats, not to protect them from their father. Whitney had requested that Travis not be allowed to be with his daughters unsupervised. She wanted someone to be present during their visits. But the courts would not agree to this. Like I said, most people who have had to navigate the family court system know how backwards and twisted it is. We know that it is not intuitive at all. Everything takes longer than it should. Everything's more complicated than it should be. And decisions are made that don't make any sense and fail to protect those who need protection the most, the children. I have always heard men complain about how the system isn't fair when it comes to children in custody, and the family courts always have a bias towards the mother. But for this case, I did some actual research, and I found out that this doesn't really seem to be the case. Joan Mayer is the director of the National Family Violence Law Center at George Washington University, and she's done some research in this area. She says, quote, courts are troublingly reluctant to believe mothers who say fathers are a safety risk to their children in custody disputes, and all too often put children at risk to satisfy their bias toward paternal rights. What is it going to take for not only society, but especially professionals who practice in family courts to recognize that one more child being murdered is one too many and that we need to do something to change how we're adjudicating these cases? End quote. Meyer's research revealed a disturbing pattern. When a mother alleges abuse by the father towards the children or makes claims that she fears for her children's safety, the family courts may actually often end up giving more custody to the father because they somehow automatically believe that what the mother is doing is exerting parental alienation, trying to turn her children against the father, trying to alienate her children from their father as a way to punish and abuse the father. In a review of about 2,000 court decisions made from January 2005 to December of 2014, Meyer found that the courts believed less than half of mothers who claimed any kind of abuse by the father. And when I say less than, I mean 41%. And there was an even lower rate when the allegation involved abuse of the children. She says, quote, there's a very strong bias. It's embedded and unstated against believing that a father is dangerous to a child and believing a mother who is saying it or a child who is saying it. End quote. Because of this, Meyer says that scores of women and children have suffered grave harm due to the court's punitive responses when a mother tries to protect her children from paternal abuse in the context of custody litigation. She says in the worst of these cases, the abusive parent has used this court-ordered access to murder the children in the ultimate act of revenge against his adult victim. The Center for Judicial Excellence agrees, posting court transcripts on their website, which illustrates that judges and other court officials were warned about a parent's violent history before placing child victims into their unsupervised care. And that's the key. That's key word there. Nobody's saying that these fathers shouldn't have access to their children. I mean, if the fathers are abusive and dangerous and maybe, have drug or alcohol problems, I think that they should be restricted from seeing the kids until they get help because they could cause further damage to the kids. But nobody's saying that's the only way. People are saying that these men should be supervised when they're with their children. And even that sometimes doesn't work, right? Because remember, Josh Powell. Josh Powell took his 3 sons into the house and set it on fire, locking out the social worker who was there to supervise the visits with him because everybody knew that he was just a dangerous banana split sundae with extra nuts. The dude was out of his mind, right? Everyone knew that. And so he was ordered to have supervised visits and he still found a way around it. But at least it will prevent the worst from happening every single time. Josh Powell hopefully would be the exception and not the rule. But yeah, we're not talking about taking away all visits between father and children. We're saying if this person is, has been accused of abusive behavior, especially if this person is being accused of being physically abusive to the children by the children. And in a family court scenario, in situations like this, the children are usually going to have a guardian ad litem, which is a lawyer, somebody unbiased who doesn't, side with either the mother or the father, allegedly, but of course they're humans, they're always going to. But anyways, they'll have someone like that who talks to them separately from the parents and will then go to court and testify on behalf of the child and say like, hey, this child doesn't want to see their father, right? Or doesn't feel safe being with their father. If that's happening, then yes, these visits need to be supervised, at least until this person gets help and, gets better. Kathleen Russell, who's the executive director at the CGE, says, quote, "There's a crisis in the family court system that is putting children in danger. When a child is murdered, the system failed. It's irrefutable evidence that something went wrong." End quote. Since 2008, there have been nearly 1,000 children killed by a parent when divorce, separation, or a custody dispute are at issue. 140 of these cases were deemed to be preventable due to court failures. 140 innocent children are gone, and they were unable to live the lives they deserve to live because the court system can't get their heads out of their asses. Okay? That's basically what we're talking about. In those 140 cases, the Center for Judicial Excellence found that there was an attempt on behalf of a protective parent to restrict an abusive parent's access to the children. They also found that there were risk factors that should have been detected by a trained judge or child advocate. Now, based on the condition that Travis Decker was in, physically and mentally, the judge should have decided to err on the side of caution and order supervised visits until Decker had completed his mental health evaluations, at least until then, and was on some medication for his BPD and CPTSD. It is as simple as that. Until you're sure this man is mentally and physically able to care for and protect his children, there needs to be someone else present when he's with his vulnerable children. Like, it's really that simple. It's not anything against him. I mean, it is, but, it's not saying like, oh, you're going to hurt your children. It's just saying like everything needs to be done at any cost to protect these children. They are young. They can't protect themselves. And if they're with their father, who they trust, they're going to be even more vulnerable. Their guards are going to be down. They're not going to be warned about stranger danger or thinking that their father's going to do something to them. Okay? There should have been supervised visits. And at this point, Travis Decker is still MIA. Like I said, I'm filming this on June 6th. He has not been taken into custody yet. They don't know where he is. They are searching. I think the FBI is involved. Homeland Security's involved. Everyone's looking for him. They haven't found him yet. He's described as being 5'8", 190 pounds with black hair worn in a ponytail and blue eyes. He was last seen wearing a light shirt and dark shorts. And anyone who believes that they may have seen Decker since Friday, May 30th, or knows of his whereabouts should call 911 immediately or call the CCSO tip line at 509-667-6844. 645. At this time, a $20,000 reward is being offered for information that leads to Travis Decker's arrest. Officials are also cautioning anyone who does believe they see Travis Decker to not approach him and be careful, because law enforcement doesn't know if Travis is armed, but they believe that he is certainly dangerous. The Chelan County Sheriff's Office has warned residents in several Washington state counties to lock their doors and sheds, especially for those who live in or own property or cabins in remote areas. And law enforcement has also requested that people who live in remote areas leave their blinds open and keep their outside lights on so that authorities can continue to conduct their searches for the wanted fugitive Travis Decker. The Sheriff's Office has stated, quote, "Please know that law enforcement professionals are patrolling at all hours in all spaces throughout this region," end quote. The police have also released what they believe to be the most recent images of Decker taken from a Ring doorbell camera. And this is a weird story because this video shows Decker approach a house and attempt to get inside. And no one who lived inside of that house knew Travis Decker. Law enforcement is saying that this video was captured before Travis took his daughters, and if that's true, it does kind of show that he was out of sorts and not thinking straight. Like, what was he at this house for? Did he believe the house belonged to his ex-wife? Was he trying to get in the house to hide or to steal something or to hurt someone inside? What was going on there? The police certainly know more than we do. But they're not saying a lot. They have said that they've executed search warrants in the area as well as gotten warrants for Decker's electronic devices. And even though they haven't released details on what they found through these warrants and their investigation, they have stated they found new information which has provided more leads to follow up on. At the time of filming this video, the search for Travis Decker has reached the closure of the Enchantments. This is a region in the Cascade Mountain Range. Officials have closed off this region and the surrounding areas, and they've announced that those areas will be closed until at least June 18th or further notice. So it sounds like they believe it's going to take a while to locate Travis Decker. As of now, that's all we know, but I do believe we're going to be getting updates as the days pass, and I will keep you updated. I can do, stories on Instagram. I can do little update videos here on YouTube. Let me know what you'd prefer, but I will be keeping you in the loop about this case because it is scary and it is tragic. And even if Travis Decker is still alive, he's changed the lives of so many people, including his own, irreparably. I can't imagine that Whitney Decker will ever get over the loss of losing her 3 daughters all at once. It's insane. Let me know what you think about this case in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video if you liked it, share it if you think it's worth sharing. And thank you so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, and stay safe. And I'll see you very, very soon.